Welcome to Senior Moments. I'm Vickie Carraher, the Senior Service Coordinator for the City of Kettering. Today we're going to talk about one of those hotbed subjects. It's been in the news a lot. We're talking about there's this movement called Defund the Police. Now, I am not, at this point, neither is Nicole, my guest, speaking for the Kettering Police Department. But some of the things that came out of the Defund the Police talks were things like maybe we have to have mental health workers working with the police department so that they can do their job, so that they're not having to make decisions that are kind of out of their training zone. An individual who is able to do crisis management, someone who's able to work with individuals with mental health and help them to get the services they need to make sure that they are not having problems with the police department. So we are very fortunate in the city of Kettering to have that particular service within our police department. My guest today is Nicole Fairburn. She is the mental health person who comes from South Community. She's, I believe, a crisis worker. Mm-hmm. And so she actually works for South Community, but she is in the Kettering Police Department on the behalf of South Community, and she works full-time with our police department to make sure that the individuals who have mental health crisis, maybe addiction issues, overdoses, those kind of situations that the police may not be trained for, and who would, most police officers haven't got that kind of mental health background. And so they are asked to make decisions that may not be exactly within their training. So we're so pleased to have Nicole with us. So welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your position with the police department, kind of how that came about, mm-hmm. and what you do with them.
Okay. So the position is officially called Crisis Intervention Specialist. Mm-hmm. A lot of other folks in my position are oftentimes called CIT co-responders, mm-hmm. and they're all the same. So there's a lot of language
mm-hmm.
that we use.
That acronyms in there.
Yeah, CIT means Crisis Intervention Team. Okay. And so officers can also be trained as CIT officers, meaning that they've gone through an additional 40 hours of training. And so the Montgomery County Adams Board offers that to officers to have that additional mental health training. Mm-hmm. So my role is primarily to assist either on scene or after the fact with crises, mostly involving mental health and substance abuse. I do try to follow up on overdoses as well, and any kind of lack of resources, whether it's homelessness or any particular crisis that the officers want to ask me to get involved with, mm-hmm. then I will.
Okay. So what is your background?
So I'm a licensed social worker.
Mm-hmm.
I have my master's degree in social work. My background has always been in crisis. I've worked mm-hmm. in a lot of different settings. I have a victim advocacy background, mm-hmm. as well as hospital, inpatient, psychiatric inpatient.
So you're pretty well-rounded mm-hmm. when it comes to mental health. Mm-hmm. I know as a nurse, I received mental health training, but mm-hmm. I am nowhere near as good as someone who's had that long career. So that is awesome that you're mm-hmm. able to do that. I know before you came, I would try to assist the police department mm-hmm. on several occasions. And, we were able to do some, and then some of it was outside of my realm.
Sure.
So so now that we have you, we mm-hmm. can kind of team do this.
Yep.
So what's your day look like with mm-hmm. the police department?
So it it can really look like a lot of different things. No day is the same. A lot of people who work in crisis or emergency or even social services in general would probably tell you the same thing. So it could really range from someone who is struggling with suicidal thoughts, or maybe someone is struggling with a mental health diagnosis that they may or may not know is diagnosed. This may be their first experience with a mental health issue, or it could be something that's ongoing, and maybe there's something that is going on with medication and they need additional supports to be able to get stabilized again, or maybe it is a victim of domestic violence and they're needing some resources and support. So it really can look like a lot of different things. Sometimes the officers will say, we're not 100% sure where to go with this. Nicole, do you want to try to see if there's any resources available? There are times where I'll work with juveniles and tap into the resources within the schools to make sure that they get support, either mental health support or guidance counselors or whatever that might be. So I try to, whatever it is, I try to tap into where they're already connected. But no day looks the same. And it also could be something that's really out of my scope, and then I would just refer
to someone else,
either to you or
to me or someone else.
Yeah.
So you're going to be out there in the community. What are some of the resources that you can help somebody get?
So it could be mental health resources, whether that is inpatient, where there is an emergency right now and that person is needing more immediate care at the hospital, or outpatient. So that could look like outpatient therapy, case management, medication, getting people connected to a primary care provider, maybe addiction treatment. It could also look like referring them to resources in the community for housing or for meeting their basic needs. It could be giving them legal resources. So it really just depends on what's going on. But kind of the main ones are mental health and substance use, resources and treatment, and then everything in the middle.
It just seems, and I don't know if it's because we've been through this long year of COVID, people tend to seem like they're a little more dependent on mental health care right now. And knowing where to go, usually that I have found, and I have individuals in my family who rely on mental health services on a regular basis and have had the ups and downs. I've dealt with that pretty much my entire life, so I understand where they're going. But sometimes it just feels like they need somebody to hold their hand and go, okay, let's go over here, or let's go over here. So you're just not like, here's a card and you're done.
Right.
So you're following through with them, helping them find those resources.
Sure.
And it seems like, as my experience is, that if someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, it often leaks into other parts of their life, whether it be housing or legal issues, because they've gotten in trouble with the law because the police didn't exactly know that they maybe had a mental illness and some kind of thing. So it's really nice to have that expertise. I know, talking with the police department, they love you, by the way. And so it's really nice to have them to say, I just feel like there's somebody to go to and to ask questions. So that's very nice. So let's say you identify that I have a mental health issue. What are some of the services that South Community offers that you can help individuals get into?
So even though I work for South Community, it's not the only option for them. So I really make sure that they know what their options are and then help them to make the decision that's best for them. Geographically, it is closer for the community that I'm serving. South Community is in the community. But so we offer therapy, case management, psychiatry. We also offer primary care services. We've got groups going on as well. We've got programs within juvenile court, in Montgomery County's court system. So there's there's more than just kind of the meat and potatoes of like the therapy and case management. There's also other programs within South Community.
Now, would somebody be eligible for a lot of programs, or they just get it, you're in this program or that program?
So it would really be based on their assessment. They would come in for an intake assessment, and then through it's a really thorough assessment around their history and what's going on currently. We call it like a biopsychosocial assessment. And so once that assessment is completed, then they would make a recommendation based on what they were, identifying in that assessment. We also can get referrals from other folks in the community, maybe the court system, hospital, or maybe children's services referring. So there will be either a referral source or that person coming in saying, I need some assistance. And so based on that intake that they would do the diagnostic assessment, then they would recommend services after that.
So let's say I'm having a mental health crisis, but I'm not in the South Community system. Let's say I have a psychiatrist, a psychologist of my own. Can you talk to those individuals and refer to those individuals, or you have to go through South Community?
No, you don't have to go through South Community. There's other community mental health centers. There's different agencies within the community and within the greater Dayton community that offer mental health services. So it doesn't have to be South Community. There's other options available to people. And it's really up to them on what they want to do and what's best for them, and also, what's most convenient to be able to access those services.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say I'm in those services, or I'm in a crisis, but I refuse treatment. I refuse drug treatment, even though I just had an overdose. Who else can we help? Can we help the family members of individuals who are experiencing crisis and may not want to get the help that they need?
Yeah, 100%. So there are services to assist family members who are in the midst of trying to help their family member, whether it's a mental health crisis or substance use, addiction. So those resources are group and individual setting for family members. And then we also have peer supporters within the community. So maybe somebody's not ready for treatment, but there is a peer supporter who's in recovery from mental health or substance use issues, and then they're really in that beginning stage of change and they're not sure. So maybe we can get them connected to a peer supporter, or maybe a group that could help them move along to a different stage of change to be able to be ready for that. But yeah, so it can be hard for family members to be there during that process, and so there are resources for them, like NAMI or whatever support groups to be able to refer them to as well.
A lot of individuals I have found, when they're in the midst of crisis, they don't realize they're in the midst of a crisis, and so a lot of times family support and help. As a family member of someone who has a very long-term crisis in a severe mental illness, I have found it difficult when that individual was seeking, wouldn't seek care, and I'm standing there going, how can you not understand that? How can you not see that? So it's good to have you there, to have that kind of thing. So can somebody from the community call you up and say, I want you to come over? What happens with your position, and how do you, like, you can call me and say, Vickie, I want to talk to you, but maybe not the same with you.
Sure. No, that's a good question. So my position is primarily set up to be a co-responder with Kettering Police. And so my referrals come directly from Kettering Police Department, whether I meet that person right then and there in real time, or they are referred to me after the fact. Sometimes there will be folks who have frequent interaction with the police, and maybe I didn't meet them in person, but they are saying, this person may benefit from you talking to them. So they may not be in crisis right now, but I am able to reach out through referral from officers or sergeants, lieutenants, to be able to try to go and respond to that person to prevent another call.
So let's say I'm someone who needs support. I don't, luckily, have any contact with the police department.
Sure.
How would I go about getting help before I need to see you? Does South Community have a way of me getting in touch with them in order to provide services?
So right now things are in a little bit of a transition around intake. So ordinarily we just do walk-ins. Right now we are doing referrals only. I don't know how long that will last. So I don't know if that'll be forever. I don't think it will be. But typically mental health agencies have walk-in times, or you can call and make an appointment to do that intake. Now, if someone is in a crisis where they're feeling like they want to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, that would be a time when we would want to bypass community mental health and go straight to the hospital. But in order to prevent that from happening and getting into those services, you can call and make an appointment at community mental health centers now at South Community right now. Like I said, we're in a little bit of a transition. However, it is usual to have walk-in hours to be able to come in and just say, I'm interested in doing that intake.
So one of the things that is very important for me as someone from the community is I want seniors and their families to know my job is not to come in and fix them, because really we're the only people that can fix ourselves.
Right.
We have to be willing. So I know in your position it must be kind of scary sometimes that someone who's experiencing a crisis may fear that you're going to take them away and put them in a mental health ward forever. So tell me a little bit about how that works and what is it that would happen when there is a in-the-moment crisis.
So part of it is education. So educating folks about what's going to be happening and why, and what to expect after. And so one of the ways to try to negate that fear is to let them know that a typical hospital stay, and I can't speak for the doctor because that's who's going to be making that decision once they get to the hospital, but let's say someone is on a pink slip or an involuntary hospitalization, that they typically are a 72-hour hold for business days, but then they also have the doctor's guidance and decision making around that. So I just try to educate them about that, about this is what's going to happen when we get to the ER, and this is where you're going to go. You're not going to be there forever. This is for safety and to get you stabilized, and then the real work really happens once they get discharged with a follow-up plan for services to make sure that they can avoid a crisis in the future.
Absolutely. So when somebody's working with you, let's say it didn't require hospitalization, should they dodge your calls when, or people will go, I didn't want to answer the door because I didn't know what you might want. So working with you, your goal is not to come in and go, you're going straight to the hospital. What would happen for individuals, because from what I understand, your goal is definitely not to send them to the hospital if they don't need that.
Right.
So if I don't need to be hospitalized, what would happen then?
So the same thing as what we had talked about with resources. So we would talk about, where are you at with your willingness to receive treatment or support. Sometimes people are not ready, like we talked about, but if they are, then we talk about like here are some of the things that are available to you, and what are the barriers? Like maybe they're afraid because they didn't have a good experience before. And so maybe we can talk through some of those things to say, do you have a preference? Do you want a male or female provider? Or do you want, XYZ? So part of that is just doing a little bit of exploring ahead of time. Maybe they don't have transportation. Maybe that's a barrier. So thinking about, is there a way to eliminate those barriers ahead of time to be able to get them where they need to be. And it may not always be therapy. It may be that they want a mentor, or they want assistance with job readiness, or they want, maybe their primary stressor is, their neighbor, and we can, figure something out in that regard. So there's a lot of different resources and solutions. And so, if they're not taken to the hospital, but they still need resources, that's exactly what my role is.
Okay, that's awesome. So I know a lot of times people ask me this all the time. My loved one might have dementia. Dementia is not a mental illness. Dementia is a physical problem. So that referral might best come to my office.
Sure.
If someone has dementia and they're in the middle of an active crisis, that's a different situation. But so there's a little bit of overlap to our jobs. And I will tell you that I speak to her like several times a week, if not a day.
I can endorse that.
Yes. So we coordinate services together and work together to try to get the person the best health care that they can. And so I appreciate the fact that you're there, and you serve as an education for me if in mental health, and I can help you with the older services.
And
so we have been very lucky to have that happen. So give me, as we wrap up, give me a little bit, what do you want people to know about your position? Just kind of go over a little bit of what we may have already covered, but in a very succinct small box, what is it that you want people to know and how to get that help?
I want people to know that there is help available. A lot of people feel like they are doing this alone, or they feel like no one is listening to them or no one cares about them. And sometimes when law enforcement is involved, there is a part where they end and I begin, because I don't do investigations and I don't do any police work, because I'm not a police officer. I'm a social worker.
I would not call you if my house, somebody's breaking into my house.
Don't call me. Don't call me.
But
I'm not
if the
gonna
guy
help.
who broke into my house is having a mental health crisis, I might give you a call. That was just a joke.
Right. But that it is very possible for people to be in a crisis and recover from that, and I am available to assist in that capacity, because when people are in crisis, they oftentimes do call the police, and so having that additional support, and knowing I'm not a police officer,
You're not going to arrest
I'm not going to arrest anyone. No, I can promise that.
You don't have that ability.
I don't. But that it may be beneficial to talk with someone who's not going to arrest you or get you in trouble, or any of those things, that I'm there to assist and provide support and resources. And sometimes when I call people on the phone, I'll say, this is Nicole, social worker or crisis intervention specialist with Kettering Police Department, and everyone goes,
oh no, not
like
the police.
Nothing's wrong. I'm just giving context of how how I'm calling, but just that I'm there to help out. Sometimes it could be a situation where there's crisis counseling needed because there's been a death, or there's been a big crisis in the community, and so crisis work is what I love to do. And
I think as we are so stressed with COVID, it's kind of like we all used to be like here, and COVID brought us here. So if we have a tragedy that goes on top of COVID, it sometimes feels, I know myself through the whole COVID thing, and then a family member has a problem and you have to drop everything to help that family member. I know myself that I feel like, really stressed and, wondering how. And also there's a big stigma to mental health. And I want to let everyone know, if you have a mental health problem, it is not your fault. You didn't do anything to cause that problem. In most cases, it is a biochemical response that you have experienced. And that biochemical response, even those individuals with addiction, we find that individuals who have addiction have different brain chemistry than a lot of us. So those are some things that we can help you with. Please never let stigma keep you from finding help for yourself. Nicole's services, my services, free of charge. And we are also, we follow HIPAA. So nobody can call and say, I saw you next door with my brother or with my next door neighbor, John. What were you doing with John? Unless John said, hey, let my next door neighbor know.
Sure.
So it's completely free. It's completely anonymous. Nobody needs to know who you are except individuals like the police who were involved in the case. Those kind of things are very important to know. So Nicole, I talked a little bit at the beginning of the program about defund the police. None of the monies for your program come out of the police budget. It comes from a separate source that realizes that there is this issue in the community and that we could do policing a little bit different. So tell us about where your funding comes from.
So the funding for the CIT programs in Montgomery County come through the ADAMIS Board, which is the Addiction and Mental Health Services Board for the county. So they give that funding towards those positions, and then the CIT or crisis intervention specialists are they work through the mental health agencies.
So say it again, we did not cut police to provide this service. It is in addition to what we were already doing as police with the police department. I, again, do not speak for the police department. So you're only one person. And you can't be there all, 24 hours a day. Although we're trying to clone you to see if we could get that coverage, but as of now, we don't have it. Tell us how, let's say something happens at 2 o'clock in the morning. What do you recommend that people do if there is a crisis?
So there are a couple of 24-hour options. So you've got, obviously you can call the police 24 hours a day. 911 or the Kettering dispatch number is 937-296-2555. Or you can call Crisis Care for Montgomery County, and they can respond 24 hours a day. And their number is 937-224-4646.
So that's important to know. And they're all in that community together. So, one helps the other. When it comes to mental health, it's not like, you're our agency, we're not going to do it. It's definitely that if you're in crisis, and we're going to get you help no matter who's available. Which is awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us on Senior Moments. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Vicki.